Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to episode 25. I love that number. 25 of No Reservations podcast, Kasey Anton's Guide to Restaurant Success. And this is where it all comes home. So this episode is financial metrics, key performance indicators for successful restaurants. That is what we're going to talk about today. That is what started this whole thing in the first place. And this is probably the most important topic of all time. Why? Well, because a business, let alone a restaurant, any business is not going to survive if it doesn't understand its financials and if it's not profitable. So that's where we come in. In order to be profitable, you have to understand your financial metrics, and you have to adhere to them to instill profit so that your business can survive, let alone thrive. Because if you don't do that, if you don't know what I'm talking about, or if you don't have any type of financial metric, then what are you doing? I'm actually, that's not even rhetorical. I'm really curious. What are you doing? Because really, it's just kind of like, all right, well, you found a space and you had some money and you put it in, you bought some equipment, you painted the walls, you opened it up, and then you hope people buy stuff. And then you hope there's more money coming in than you have to pay out for stuff and people or whatever. And then at the end of the day, there's more money left over. I'm guessing that's the business plan, which is no plan at all. And this is why so many restaurants suffer and close, or just close, but most likely suffer and close. So that is not a plan. That's not even a thing. So if that was your idea, your plan, let's just laugh at it, laugh it off, and pretend like that's not actually doable, because it's not. You need to have money. Okay, profit is not a dirty word. It is not greed. It is not bragging rights. It's not ego-driven. It is literally a thing that every business must have just to survive. And we need to really rethink our take on profit. And why do I keep talking about profit? Well, because it's all going to come down to that. How are you able to make profit? And here's how you do it. It's actually pretty simple. I'm not saying it's easy at all, because it's definitely not easy. It's not easy for the majority of restaurants in the world, but it is very simple. So, for example, if you have a brand new restaurant, and you don't have to have a brand new restaurant, this will apply to one that's been in business for however long, it doesn't matter. But it's easier to talk about, say, if you're a brand new restaurant and you're going to price out what you're going to sell. So it's usually your menu, right? And just say, okay, I'm going to cost out this menu that I'm going to offer, and it's going to be a 30% food and beverage cost. That's an industry kind of average that everybody uses. It doesn't have to be yours, but it's a good starting point. It might be an average. So for every dollar that somebody gives you, 30 cents of that dollar is going to go to pay for your food and beverages, right? That's a 30% cost. So maybe that's your one model. That's your first key performance indicator, that you need to be running a 30% food and beverage cost if that's what you said you're going to do, if that's part of your model. The same is true for labor. Okay, well, how much payroll do you need for this business that you're starting or you're in? Maybe it's, again, 30%. That is an industry average. It's usually more or less than that, but let's fall in the middle and call it 30. So that's another 30%. So now we have a 30% food and beverage cost, 30% labor cost, add 30 plus 30, we're at 60% of 100, right? So 60% is geared toward your prime cost. That's what's called in the restaurant industry, your prime cost, food, beverage, and direct labor, your payroll. So that leaves 40 cents on the dollar, right? If you're sticking with me here, we start with $1. Someone's going to walk into your restaurant, they're going to give you $1, and they're going to buy something. Then 30 cents goes to your food and beverage vendors to pay for that. 30 cents goes to your payroll company. That leaves you with 40 cents to spend on everything else. Usually the next biggest number is going to be your occupancy cost, your rent, right? So occupancy is going to be your rent and your utilities, sometimes your building insurance, your water bill, things like that, like anything it takes to open the shell of your restaurant, right? So if you think about just like if you just had to open the doors and turn the lights on, turn the hoods on, make sure there's heat or AC, that it's legal for you to be open, right? That that everything is up to par. So hot water, all that. That's kind of an occupancy, what it takes to be able to occupy and use the space. That's usually the next biggest item after food and beverage and payroll. And we're going to say an industry average might be 10%, which actually is pretty good. I see a lot of restaurants running higher than that, which sometimes can kind of get you into hot water, no pun intended. And I have a few that run less than that, which is phenomenal. And in my book, Profit First for Restaurants, and I model 2 different ways to run a restaurant, to open a restaurant, let's say, whether you want 250 seats or 40 seats, I'll take the 40 seat one all day long, right? Because that's generally a 40 seat restaurant is going to have much lower occupancy cost than a 250 seat restaurant. It's more controllable. I like it that way. But to each their own, right? So that's another 10% or 10 cents. So now we have 30% or 30 cents going to food and beverage, the same 30% going to labor, and now 10 going to your occupancy. So that's 30 plus 30 plus 10, that's 70 cents on every dollar, or 70% going to just those 3 big items. Now that leaves 30%. You have 30 cents left. And we're not done, right? Because there's so many other things that go into operating any business, let alone a restaurant. So we usually have your administrative and overhead. So that could be your general liability, liquor liability insurances. That could be dues and subscriptions. That could be your accountant or your lawyer, printing the menus, ink, office supplies, your point of sale. If you're leasing your point of sale. If you have a social media company, maybe you pay monthly, anything like that. So we have that. That's that's administrative and kind of general. So of the 30 cents, how much of that are you going to attribute? Maybe it's 5, right? 5 cents on the dollar, or 5%. So that leaves us with just 25 cents. Okay, so what's next? Well, the other thing that we have is direct operating, we call it for restaurants. That usually includes laundry and linen. It could include lease payments. You lease a refrigerator, lease a dishwasher, lease a barware washer, whatever it is. Glassware, plates, silverware, paper goods, all of those things, direct operating. That's kind of the stuff that you need to buy in order to operate or facilitate the promise that your restaurant gives out to its customers. Direct operating can be another, sometimes 10 to 20% overall, right? That can be pretty high. So let's call it 10. We had 25 cents left. We got to give 10 over to direct operating. That only leaves you 15 cents or 15%. And then you can sort of decide based on your model how you're going to spend that last 15 cents or 15%. But remember, your owner's pay, your owner's taxes, and your profit most likely are in that amount. They're in that amount. So you need to figure out what you can live on, what you're willing to take. Make sure the taxes, that's not really a choice you make. You have to pay taxes, and the profit. So if we have 15 cents left over, maybe you just want to say, okay, well, 5% is going to go to profit, and that's fine. That is fine. It depends on what your goals are for your business. But I mean, that you can work with that. So 5% goes over to profit, and we make sure we take that first and set that aside. And then the last 10 cents that we have possibly could be owner's pay and owner's taxes. It could also go for maybe other expenses that you have for your particular restaurant concept that maybe others don't. So those are sort of key metrics, but you need to know what it is for your model. Let me say that again. You need to know what those percentages are for your restaurant, for your business model. You need to know what they are. They're not going to be the same for everyone. They never are. Everybody builds a different type of restaurant with different prices and different costs, but you need to know what yours are. And one of the stories, maybe 2, but one of the main stories in the book Profit First for Restaurants, I talk about a burger shack, and they didn't do this exercise. They did what I had said in the beginning of this podcast, where I believe this really nice guy found a space, took it over, a restaurant space, opened it up in a college town, thought, hey, this is going to be great. College kids love burgers. I'm going to sell 1,000,000 of them. So let's see. Let me paint the walls and plug in some ovens and, buy some t-shirts and some aprons, and let's see what we do. That is not a business plan. I think that's what he did. It's common. I see it a lot. And he started slinging burgers and selling them and came to us here at Spark years later with, I think at that point, over $350,000 in debt. Because why did he go so far in debt? Because he didn't have his key performance indicators. He didn't know that his business model was set to lose money. It was set to lose money. He didn't know it because he didn't have it mapped out the way I'm mapping it out for you right now. He just kind of assumed in his head, and again, this is not a knock on that gentleman. He's a great guy, and I see this all the time. I'm just using that as an example. He just believed that, okay, well, I think that students will pay $6 for a burger, so that's my price. Okay, and then I'm going to go to these vendors and I'm going to buy the buns and the ground beef and the lettuce and the tomato and the pickles and whatever. And you know what I mean? Like, I hope they give me the best price, but I don't know. And I'm going to put it together and I'm going to sell a burger, and hopefully it all works out to be 30% or something like that. And then I'm going to go on my merry way. He had no idea. That's how he did it. Oh, I can sell it for $6 because that's what they'll buy it for. And oh, I got to go buy this stuff from this vendor and that's what they sell it for. So I guess I'm stuck, and let's cross my fingers and hope I make money. Here's what really happened when we actually dug into it, is after we did his food costs, and it actually was 58%, not your typical average 30 or anything of the sort. It was 58%. So if 58 cents on every dollar was just going to sell his burgers, his number one selling item, and then his payroll was about 35, I think. So 58 plus 35 is, what are we at, 90 something? 58 plus 35, 93%. That's just his prime costs were 93%. His prime cost, just the two first costs, 93%. Then his occupancy and all of his direct operating was like another 46%. So now we're over 100%. And what happens when your costs are more than 100% of your revenue? It creates a loss, right? Because if some student is going to pay him $5 for a burger, it actually costs him about $5.78 to sell that burger. So he was in the hole, let's say, for example, 78 cents. Every time he sold a burger, he lost 78 cents. Those are not exact numbers, but that's basically what happened. I think it was worse than that. And he didn't know it because he didn't have his business model strategized out. He didn't have the right account set up with the percentages. He didn't know his true menu costs. He didn't know any of those things. All he knew was people liked his burgers. He liked selling them. Money was coming in, and he couldn't get it out the door fast enough. And there was never enough money. So he had to go out and he had to get debt to be able to pay people and keep the lights on so he could keep selling burgers, so he can keep creating a loss. And that's where we come up with the $357,000 in debt when we met him. And it got a little bit worse until we had to basically pull the plug and tell him this model is not going to work. This model is upside down unless you're willing to literally double the price of everything and control your costs and have a good 20 years ahead of you to pay off this debt. It's never going to happen. And that's what we ended up having to do and file it. And that's unfortunate and that's extreme. But that is that's what happens if you don't know your business model and don't have the key financial metrics to measure up against every week or every month and make sure you're hitting them. And in line with that is the cash management system of Profit First for Restaurants, which physically requires you to move the money based on the percentages that you believe you need to be running in your business so that you have this living, breathing budget in bank accounts to use. And that's what Profit First for Restaurant is, right? So if you haven't read the book, I'll just cover it really fast right now. We're going to manage your money and manage your key performance metrics using bank accounts. So we're going to have the first account that's going to be your income account. All of your sales, all of your revenue goes into that account. They have just a big pile of money in that account. And then every week, or more often if you need to, less often if you're doing well, every week, every day, whatever it takes for you, you're going to go in that income account and you're going to allocate everything in there to your other accounts. The first ones you're going to do are your prime costs. So you're going to allocate, let's say 30 cents or whatever it is. Maybe it's 35, maybe it's 40 cents on every dollar to your food and beverage account. It depends on your model. And then you're going to make sure there's enough money in there to cover the bills, your food and beverage bills. And if it's not, then guess what? You're not running the food and beverage costs that you think you are. And now you got to make decisions immediately, not weeks, months, years down the road when you finally realize it, like our Burger Shack did. Immediately you're going to say, oh my God, my food and beverage cost is too high. What am I going to do? And there are plenty of things you can do to mitigate that. So we're going to set aside, let's say 30 cents on every dollar of that income account into that account. Then we're going to take another 30% of the income account and we're going to move it to your payroll account and you're going to run your payroll out of it. And the same thing, if you go to run your payroll and there's not enough money in that payroll account, then guess what? You're not running a 30% payroll, a labor. You're not, and you want to know that immediately so you can start making changes immediately to offset that. And in the meantime, you can't balance the payroll, right? So now you have to borrow from somewhere else. And that strategic decision is really going to be the game changer in how you run your business. So that's the next one. So 30% for labor, let's say, again, depending on your percentages or for your own business, yours can be different. And then the remaining 40% is going to be split among profit. That's the first one. Maybe it's 1%, maybe it's 2%, maybe it's 5%, maybe it's 10%. You can do you on this as long as it fits your business model. We're going to set that aside. Then we're going to take our owner's pay and our owner's taxes. And then that last amount will go to your OpEx or operating expense account. And that's what you have to pay your occupancy, to pay your admin and overhead, to pay your direct operating. That's what you have available. And you're going to do this every time there's a big deposit that comes in the income account. You're going to allocate it based on percentages right to those other accounts. And then you'll be able to operate your business within its means. It won't become bloated with expenses that you cannot afford because the money won't be there for you to do that. And then when you do that, you become super efficient and really creative and really, really be able to strategize your business so much better. And your business will be so much better off for it in so many ways. And believe me, we see this all the time. So that's what I wanted to say. I know that was kind of a lot, but I wanted to make sure I went over everything in terms of key performance indicators, how important they are, how important the Profit First Restaurant system is. It can be. You certainly don't have to use it, but I can't imagine why you wouldn't. It's going to keep you on track every day, every week, versus waiting for those financial reports to come out at the end of the month or the quarter and having time to sit down with your bookkeeper and accountant and kind of go over the numbers and figure out, oh, am I doing okay or am I not doing okay? This cash management system keeps you on your toes and it gamifies it, and it's just going to make you a better operator, and your restaurant will be so much better for it. So even beyond all that, you do have to know your food costs on a regular basis, your beverage costs, your payroll costs, your occupancy. You got to know those. And the other thing that you should also know is your break even. That's another big one. Know your break even number, because if you're not hitting it, know what that means. So if your break even, for example, let's say is $10,000 a week, you need to bring in $10,000 a week in sales, assuming you can control all your costs and that you'll break even. You'll end up at being zero. So you won't have to go into debt, but there won't be anything extra, right? And if you know that 10,000 is your number and you have a slow week or two and maybe you're at 6, 7, 8, or 9,000, that's a loss in there. And that loss has to be funded somewhere. Usually it comes out of profit, whether you like it or not, but now you physically will move that money from your profit account to cover it. Sometimes it comes out of owner's pay because they'll pay themselves last to make sure everyone else is on board. But you want to know this immediately. If you are running at a loss, it means that usually where debt comes in to backfill that loss. Loss is a real thing. It's money you don't have that you need to go get so you can keep running. And usually that means some type of debt or investment. And so if you're running regularly at a loss, let's say, and you can't get back up to your break even, then you're just going to have to know that you're going to have to figure out a way to fund this. How much longer are you willing to let it go at this loss piling up before you're really going to have to make some serious decisions? Or is this just temporary? Maybe you're seasonal and maybe you know that you're going to have a loss, but that loss is only going to happen for maybe 2, 3, 4 months out of the year. and then your other months run at a profit. And in our seasonal restaurants, which is great because during those profit months, we actually create one extra account called a drip or a seasonal account, where we put a couple of percentage points over to this account. So when those months come around where you're not even hitting break even, we can drip money from that seasonal account in to cover your basic expenses so you don't actually really feel that loss. All right. If you have any questions on any of this, please feel free to buy Profit First for Restaurants by Kasey Anton. It's in paperback on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or wherever books are sold, but also on Audible as well. You can download it. And through our website, we have all kinds of information and tools and the free first 2 chapters and all that on Profit First, the number 4 restaurants.com. All the information is there for you as well. So once again, thank you so much for joining us and have a wonderful day. I'll see you next time.